Welcome to Heaping Spoonful, a twice-monthly conversation with restaurateurs, chefs, growers, and others who have helped generate the legends associated with the eateries across the Mid-South. The team at Benny Keith is proud to sponsor this adventure with the goal of preserving the stories that have helped cultivate an amazing food scene across the Mid-South. So kick back and enjoy a Heaping Spoonful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Heaping Spoonful, a podcast where I get the rare opportunity to visit with some of the Mid-South's top chefs and restaurateurs. I'm Kelly Bass, and for more than 30 years, I wrote about restaurants for Little Rock, Arkansas newspapers and later for some magazines around here. And thanks to the good people at Benny Keith Foods Mid-South Division, I now talk about restaurants, which is a lot more fun than writing about them. Today, my guest is Perry Smith, who has helped resurrect one of Arkansas's most beloved brands, Minuteman. That's an awesome responsibility and one I know Perry takes seriously. So welcome to Heaping Spoonful, Perry.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you being here, and thanks to Benny Keith as well.
So if someone was going to take a wild guess, because everybody who pays attention to the restaurant scene in Arkansas knows that Minuteman is back, and that it's back in a getting going way, and it's going to end up being bigger. But if anybody was going to take a wild guess into the background and general resume of the person who has put years into getting this Minuteman resurrection campaign off the ground, they may not have figured it was a former Maryland high school track star, college football player, amateur boxer, actor, and a businessman who led a large restaurant group that at its peak generated more than $50 million a year in annual revenue. And on top of that, who has a partner that's a retired Air Force Brigadier General. But that's who you are. And so how lucky are Minuteman lovers that the latest manifestation of your passion and your focus and your business acumen is this legendary Arkansas restaurant institution. Can you explain kind of how you got here?
Well, when I hear that in my career kind of condensed that way, though, Kelly, it makes me a little tired. I say, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about that. So just to clear the air a little bit, I'm an Arkansan,
right?
And being an Arkansan, I've been I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it's been a while, and I just so you understand the beginnings of that journey, and maybe I can explain to the audience too. We were kids here in Arkansas, and my father got a federal government assignment working for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we moved out in the 70s, but we moved to the DC area, and we were always back in Arkansas. So in a way, the move out of Arkansas probably happened when I was 18, because for every I went to college in Pennsylvania. For every holiday, for any event, we're back down at family. My deeper family history for Arkansas goes back to, we owned the hardware store for generations in Stevens, Arkansas.
Wow.
And the family were cotton purveyors. They sold cloths. They sold equipment to the oil men and everything in South Arkansas. They were in the timber business for a while, but deep roots in Camden, Magnolia, Stevens, and that. What I always knew about the hardware store was that was kind of the center of the town. That was where people went. The kids went to go get BBs for their BB guns. They went to get candy, that kind of thing. So that little kind of anchor history has always been with me. And when we were even in Maryland moving there, again, we're back in Stevens, we're back in Camden, we're back in El Dorado to go visit family. My aunt and uncle, Eamon Mahoney, still live in El Dorado.
Jody Mahoney's in my Rotary Club.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. And I can tell you stories about Jody.
I bet.
he was a real hoot. So the ties and the roots to Arkansas run really deep. Now, flash forward, I have a hospitality career that took place outside of Arkansas, but always having that ear to the ground in Arkansas and finding out what is happening in Arkansas. Still talking to my folks and people here. So I get to again, flash forward. You can stop me here if I'm skipping too far ahead. So I start to think about, after I've finished up with my concepts, I'm in hospitality. I've got Matchbox restaurants in the Washington, D.C. area. We're growing it. We had one location in California. There was a step-off point, though. where I said, I'm getting older. I need to think about something that's a little bit more, that speaks to my heart. I can fold my career into this, my experience, and do something that's going to kind of bring together all of these passions. So I step off of Matchbox, and at the same time, that's when I had connected with Miss McGugan, the last Minuteman operator in El Dorado, because I'm looking at this and I'm saying, wow, I'd like to get back in the restaurant business here in Arkansas. How can I do that? And, kind of riffing here, one of the reasons that I did it as well is I'm doing my homework on what the food scene is here in Arkansas. And I keep mentioning, the operators like Yellow Rocket, these guys here, and I'm going, wow, I'm following their careers. I'm saying they're part of this big wave here, and we're seeing this food renaissance throughout Little Rock, throughout Central Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. A lot of people like really coming in with new ideas, and the market receiving them and saying, yeah, this is good stuff. So I'm watching this going, I'm saying, there's I'm tired of DC. I'm tired of the Northeast. I mean, for whatever reasons, I can make my way home.
Right.
And so it's the idea about, and the arrogance, I think. Can we resurrect this brand? Right. This brand that meant so much to so many people.
Yeah. Well, and talk about it, because you tell a great story about how your father influenced you into understanding how special Minuteman was when you were a kid.
So that was during the peak of the time. That was in the 70s when Minuteman, there was a location in just about every town in Arkansas. And at one point, there were 57 locations of Minuteman, founded in 1948. So I lived in right off of Pine Manor in Cantrell, and we walked up to the Minuteman, which so many people were able to do in different towns. If they walked in, on Harkrite or in Conway, we were just up in Newport. With our food truck, and the people came out in droves for Minuteman because it was that centerpiece of the community. And so the story is that the McDonald's, and not knocking McDonald's, but McDonald's had just opened up down the road on Cantrell.
Still there, second one that opened in Little Rock.
That's right, same location. For us as a kid, we looked at it and said, oh, well, what is this thing, though, these golden arches, and we want to go there. So we went there. And my dad, we talked him into taking us there, and my mom, and, so we had a meal there. And I kind of remember vaguely, because I was about 7 or 8, I just remember his reaction when he was eating the hamburger, and he kind of made a face, and so then however much time goes by, and he says to me, let's go. I said, let's go to McDonald's. And he looks at me and he says, we're never going back there. And I said, well, why? I thought it was good. And he says, that's not a good hamburger. He goes, that's not good food. He goes, we are going to go to Minuteman because we've always gone to Minuteman, and we're going to go get the burger and a radar pie. And he goes, that has flavor to it. Yeah. That other thing didn't have flavor to it. And then the capper of it was, and he says, and I want you to remember something. Minuteman was founded and started in Arkansas. It's an Arkansas restaurant, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and again, look how that stuck with you. Well, I went to that same McDonald's and had the same opinion, and loved Minuteman. I've told you when I was a kid, we went to Minuteman often, and my father was a CPA downtown, and I'd go to work with him some, and I always had lunch at Minuteman at 4th and Broadway. And my mother learned about a promotion they were having that if you came in and said, there's no bigger, better burger and no better eating either, and you get it in a minute as your friendly Minuteman, you got a free meal. And she took me in there and took my birth certificate because I was a big kid and I got my free meal. So, I mean, I was 8 or 9, you were 7 or 8 when you learned about, when you learned why Minuteman is special. So to be able to come back and sink your, again, take everything you've learned in your career and apply it to this project is really cool. But let's back up a little bit. So you went to high school in Maryland, and then you went to college at Lehigh and played football. And which is a high level of football. That's close to Philly or in Philly, right?
It's actually in the Lehigh Valley. It's probably about 50 or 60 miles west of Pennsylvania, or excuse me, of Philadelphia. But can I just tell you a quick story here? And this goes back to another Arkansas story about this football thing. So now I'm 21, and I'm going into my senior year, which is a pivotal year in my college football career, and slated to be the starter. And we had a grueling schedule that year. You know, Lehigh was 1AA football. We were playing teams like Navy, Colgate. I mean, Delaware. These are good teams there in the Northeast. But my grandfather passed away that summer. And so I looked at my parents and I said, and they had a place out in Cadron Ridge out in Conway. And I said to them, I said, look, Grandma needs help. My grandfather passed away. He had a big place out in Cadron Ridge, and let me go down there and I'm going to help her. And the other part of that is that she connected me with the football coach at UCA, and said, okay, can I go work out with these guys? So that summer, I got I won't say what, beat by these guys all summer in 114-degree heat down here in Arkansas. And I went back up to Lehigh that time, having spent this whole summer immersed in Little Rock and Conway and working out and training and working outside the whole time. And I went up there, and camp was never easier for me. I made it through the season. I was healthy. Yeah. I was in the best shape of my career. And I owe it back to that, that collective where they took me in and they said, okay, we're going to work with this guy. And it was phenomenal.
Yeah, that is cool. And so your athletic career, one of your early platforms for success, and then that led, because you were, I guess your first acting role was as a football player, which didn't take a lot of acting. Set us up on how all that came to be and sort of and again, I know it wasn't a huge part of your career, but it's an interesting period. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, so for me, this is kind of like what we call an associative reality. These things kind of are somewhat associative. And so from a hospitality standpoint, I always worked jobs whenever I could in hospitality. And that was from security to bartending to managing restaurants. And so really what that ties into is when I finished college, I decided I wanted to get a communications degree and go to New York. And I'd always known at some point that I wanted to live in New York City. So I moved to New York. I decided I was going to get my advanced degree at NYU, but I was always working in hospitality. So I was working at a bar in a small bar in Greenwich Village that had been a speakeasy, and I was doing everything there. I was bartending, I was managing, I was waiting tables, I was working in the kitchen, and learning all aspects of the business. And the owner was pretty generous, and as far as that went, and he taught me just about everything I needed to know. So I started to learn the nuts and bolts of the business there. I got involved in acting, and because I had roommates who were actors, and they said, hey, there's a casting here. You want to go to this casting? And it happened to be as an athlete or something like that. And I walked in and didn't know what I was doing, and I got cast. Yeah. So that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I took some acting classes that were also kind of relative to my communications degree. Sure. I ended up writing my thesis around this journey in acting. And then I kind of reached a peak where I had these two flows going between hospitality and acting. And I said, I'm actually not that good an actor. and I enjoyed it, but I said, now I'm going to really focus on my hospitality career.
That's cool. But you were in a Miller Lite ad, right? Wasn't that right?
Yeah, you've done your homework.
Yeah.
Well, it does show up on YouTube from time to time.
That's funny. That's great.
I worked with Dwight Clark, who used to, he was the guy from The Catch.
The Catch, right? Yeah. Helped make Joe Montana's early part of his fame. So then again, you kept moving forward. I mean, you're in the hospitality business. You're running a small place in Greenwich Village, but then you end up, continuing to take on bigger and bigger roles. And then you got into this, and again, I watched an interview with you and talking about the advent of the theme bars. You talked about Hard Rock Cafe, and I know there's Margaritaville and, all those kind of things. And as the woman who was interviewing you said, we had Studebakers. And
that's right.
But yours was polyesters, which it took her a while to figure out it's polyester because it's an 80s type theme place, right? And that sounds like it was a rocket ship when it was going. I mean, just like, man.
Well, there were a couple of guys who would come into the bar in Greenwich Village and talk about this thing they were building, and I think it was on 26th and 10th or something in New York, and it was a bar called Polyester, spelled Polyesther, it was in the woman's name, and they had gotten some play on MTV. Again, flash forward, we took up with each other and he said, hey, we're expanding in New York. Why don't you come run our restaurants for us there? They opened up one on 8th Street in New York and then one on the Upper East Side. And I was managing, a couple of those units for them. And a lot of this, Kelly, is about you kind of reach points in your career and you say, okay, I'm going to either pivot here and move forward, or I'm going to go do my own thing. And I told them, I said, I've learned everything I can learn here.
Right.
You guys want to expand. They had opened up in Florida. And I said, having grown up again in the DC area, I said, let's take polyesters to DC. So we did. And it ended up being about at its peak, about a 20,000 square foot nightclub. Just, everything from cover charge to live entertainment to dancing. And it was the retro type of theme bar. And people remember Planet Hollywood. Sure. There were a slew of these things. Hard Rock was huge, as you mentioned. So this was kind of that theme. And it lasted for that part of my career was about 10 years.
Right.
Exactly 10 years from start to finish. We started it, they got going. And then by the time that I'd finished, selling out, it was right in kind of the early 2000s.
Right. And, again, you rode the wave while it was hot, and then you got out. And then I guess at that point, is that when you started working into getting the Matchbox group put together?
We did. There was a little bridge there. I also invested in a kind of a fun retail futon furniture business in Chicago. I was living in Chicago at the time because we had polyesters there, and built that to a couple of different locations. Had an artist who was running it. He needed some business savvy. But then I decided that, I do need to, it was fun and it was a good breather between polyesters and getting back into hospitality. And I decided at that point to shift. I was married, kids on the way, and decided to move back to the East Coast to do Matchbox. So the Matchbox, Chicago's a cold city.
Yes, it
Kelly,
is.
it's cold.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit tired of that. And I said, let's get back to the familiar stomping grounds. But I had also been visiting Washington. So again, let's think it through. Between right around 2001, 2002, there were rough times. 9/11 had happened, but Washington, D.C. was a city that was ripe for opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the new restaurant scene was just beginning to grow there. The club business was done. That 9/11 killed that. But I called my old landlord and I said, what do you have in the Chinatown New Entertainment District down in Washington? And he said, hey, great to see you again. I have this, and this. So that was where it was a little bit of not as much planning as one might think, but I knew that the opportunity existed because we saw the bustle, we saw the building, and he said, you can have this building, or this building, and let's just do a deal. And so I said, well, here's a small building.
Right.
And I just on the fly, he said, what are you going to put in here? And I said, well, I think it'll be kind of a tavern type of bar thing, full service. And he goes, what's it called? And I looked at it and I said, well, small building. It's Matchbox.
Yeah.
And he said, wow, that's a great name. He goes, why is that? And I go, well, look at it.
Yeah.
So we did kind of make it up on the fly, but I still had my team from the polyesters days. And one person was, a teammate was actually a pretty accomplished restaurateur in the town of Huntington, West Virginia. So I drew these guys back together and we founded Matchbox.
Wow, that's cool. All right, we're going to take a short break here on Heaping Spoonful and be back in just a bit with Perry Smith, who is back in Arkansas working to resurrect Minuteman brand. So stick around, we'll be right back.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We at Benny Keith Foods enjoy talking about the food scene almost as much as we enjoy providing the top quality ingredients that help restaurateurs and chefs across the Mid-South create their magic. Now let's dive even deeper into the culinary world with your host, Kelly Bass.
All right, welcome back to Heaping Spoonful. Our guest today is Perry Smith, who has brought back the revered Minuteman brand to the burger lovers of Arkansas. So you built Matchbox, and did you all expand that, or was that always just a one location kind of place?
Well, we did. We had a number of locations in the D.C. area. We had an outpost of Matchbox in California. But when I left, and again, let's go through about 10 years, and I finalized my out right around 2016, but I stepped out of it right 2012, 2013. And that was about that other 10-year tranche I talk about. That seems to be how my life kind of falls into, into these 10-year periods.
So you helped build polyesters. You got out of that one. You helped build Matchbook Box. You got out of that one. So, that's kind of my version of the American dream, is building a business and then getting out with what looks like the right time. So knowing those things, some might think you didn't have to jump right back into the work world if you didn't want to, but you did. And again, with something that really resonated with your youth and with your Arkansas roots. And then you're just some other senses of, things that are important to you. So that was a long process. And you said you started talking to Linda McGugan, the owner of the only Minuteman left in the world, after having 57 at one point. So talk about that process, because it doesn't sound like she was that eager to jump right in.
Well, I had been re-engaging and coming back down to the state. Kelly and I was visiting my aunt and uncle in El Dorado. And the thing that I would always tell them is, I said, well, let's go over to Minuteman and have lunch. And so we just showed up and would eat lunch over there. And I introduced myself, or they had them introduce me to Miss McGugan, and I saw what she was doing there. And I looked at it and I started to kind of poke at it a little bit and do a little bit of homework. And I said, oh, well, interesting. This seems to be the only one that's left. How is that? So my curiosity got the best of me. I started doing homework online about the history of Minuteman and reacquainting myself with that. What I found was that the founders' papers, Wes Hall, they were all available for review at the University of Arkansas Little Rock. And I said, oh my gosh. So the next, again, the curiosity bug got the best of me. And I said, well, the next time I come down, I'm going to go sit down and immerse myself in that. And that led to about 4 sessions of hours of sitting in the library, reading the papers, understanding the history, understanding what happened to Minuteman, and such a fascinating journey. And at that point, again, I would, poke my head down in El Dorado and talk to Linda, and we'd become friendly.
Right.
And it took a while. It took longer than people might expect. I mean, this started again probably 2013, somewhere in there. These trips down here, and as I mentioned, before, I'm also paying attention to what is happening in the food scene here, and I'm seeing a lot of really, really interesting things happen in Arkansas, and finding my love again. For the reasons it's what we talk about here. There's something different about being an Arkansan, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, these are the things that I need in my life right now. So drawing all this together, the hardest part about this whole thing was saying, can I assemble a team? Because it's about the team.
Sure. Can
I get the right people in place? Because it's one thing to do something, but it's another thing to do something like Minuteman. And I just, these are the things that keep me up at night, because this is a legendary brand that's been in Arkansas since 1948. Right. 1948.
And you got to have the right people to carry it forward the way you want to carry it forward, for sure. So we know we have strong listenership for Heaping Spoonful across the Mid-South, particularly in Arkansas. And some of our regulars who are of a certain age and a certain geography know about Minuteman. And we've already talked a little bit about the fact that we're 57 of them at one point in time. But you know more than almost anybody, except maybe his family, about Wes Hall, the legendary founder. Can you talk about the aspects of his legacy? Because I know he did some things that were really remarkable and unique at the time that he did them.
So, yes, thank you. And so Wes Hall was an incredible innovator. He founded Minuteman in 1948. He had his own different restaurant group at the time. He was a veteran. He served actually during the Korean conflict. But when he was growing Minuteman, he essentially there was a split. And sometimes I can get the dates wrong in this, but it was a little bit in the early to mid 50s. He split with his original partnership group and took over Minuteman primarily. That partnership group, a lot of people don't know, went over to another concept called Black Angus, which is actually still around today too. So, but Wes Hall, during his entire career, he had other concepts as well, but he primarily focused on Minuteman. He was able to build it up to about 57 locations through the course of 2.5 decades. He also had a company called Dixie Equipment.
Yep.
But he was an incredible innovator. And what's interesting about him is that here people throw around the idea about entrepreneurship and starting a business, and people think they can do it out of their back pocket. Wes Hall was a person doing this and scaling a business in a time that other people didn't do this. I mean, no one was doing what he was doing. I take it back. The only other people in his industry that were actually doing this, it was In-N-Out Burger. Yeah. Same year, 1948 in California. And so Wes Hall did things like he was one of the first. And again, his career went to, I think at one point he was the head of the National Restaurant Association. But he would bring in other partners. And one of those partners was Raytheon, here in Arkansas. They wanted to test out a new product called a radar range.
Yeah, which we know as a microwave.
Right, which is about the size of a VW at the time.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm joking. And he partnered with Raytheon to bring in and create a food item around this magical radar range. And he created the radar pie, or a radar range pie, which affectionately are now known as radar pies. He was in moving through his career, going into the 60s and 70s. He was one of the first to partner with a larger supplier, and he partnered with Coke, and he did the signature glass. That was the Minuteman glass with stars and stripes, and he had this partnership with Coke and was one of the first to people come in and you buy your soda and you keep your glass, and that's the souvenir. Well, he was a marketer. Yeah. He knew if they walked out there with that, with it, and then they would get a discounted soda when they came back in.
Sure.
So he did those things, and he also had the old-fashioned hamburger. He sold that intellectual property to Wendy's. And the other thing that he did, which is so innovative as well, is he was one of the first, if not the first, to do a kids meal. He had a meal called the Magic Meal.
I remember it, yeah.
And he sold that IP off to Burger Chef, which was then Burger King.
Yeah.
And so he's doing all these things, and I give him so much credit for this, because when you look back at his career, I don't know who was helping him. I don't know who his other creative guy was. I don't see that there was anyone in this organization. I just look at him and I said, this guy was a genius.
Yeah, and that's all the things that we take for granted now. I mean, kids' meals and microwaves. I mean, we all have one now, but I remember the same thing. I'd never seen one except at Minuteman. Right. And I learned that they can get things preternaturally hot, and you better watch the roof of your mouth when you're eating one of those pies. But I learned my lessons for sure. Right. So you got it done with Linda. You got an agreement, and you opened on September 11th of all days in 2020. So we're in the pandemic. You opened the first new Minuteman in forever in Jacksonville, Arkansas. So how true to the old menu were you? And in doing research, I had no idea that at some point Minuteman, at least some of them added Mexican food and then chicken and some other things. I just remember it, for number 2 and number 5 and pies and shakes and stuff. So how true were you to the menu, or did you just kind of morph off of it and kind of it's the foundation, but it's not really the same?
That's a very good question, and what I can just tell you is that people are so passionate about Minuteman, and they give us their feedback, and we love to hear the feedback, and they let us know, hey, this tasted right or this didn't taste right. What I try or what I have to look through here is, because Minuteman has been around for almost a little bit over 75 some odd years here. You have to look at Minuteman and say, well, what phase was Minuteman in at the time? At one point, they had a fish sandwich. At one point, they had a ham sandwich. There were so many different items on the menu. They did breakfast, called the Big Biscuit Breakfast. So what we had to do is going through all the research and the homework, we had to look at okay, where did Minuteman end? And one of the later iterations, after Wes Hall had sold it to his CFO, James Hansen, and again, most recent memory is they added Latin or Mexican items to the menu. So Miss Linda down in El Dorado, that was her endpoint. She remembers from taking over the store in '84, the change over to the Mexican menu, and so we had to look at those recipes because that would have fit into everyone's most recent memory. Mm-hmm. There were other items that we said, well, we're not going to bring back. I mean, the ham sandwich, it wasn't quite, it didn't make the cut.
Right.
We can bring those back as specials. The thing that I want to try and articulate is also for any food service and operators out there, you understand that recipes change. it's also about supply chain as well.
Sure.
There were things that they were putting in those recipes that we can't get now, that things also that we don't want to add now. There was a high degree, and I'm outing, the process here. There was MSG that were put in a lot of the recipes, and some of the chili and some of the burger shake, a lot of MSG. And so we had to pull those out. Well,
Right.
What does that do? It changes the flavor a little bit. Certain thickeners, we decided that we wanted to move away from clear gel and use cornstarch. So for some of the things, and did that affect the taste and the flavors a little bit? But I can tell you this: I have original recipes that are written out on 3x5 cards that are just tattered, and we tried to stick to those as best we could.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, so pandemic notwithstanding, of course, there was tons of excitement because there's brand equity. I mean, if you'd opened, Perry's Burgers, then they might have learned that that's a great burger. But Minuteman has such brand equity. So I would imagine even with a pandemic going pretty strong in September of 2020 that you had good crowds.
We did. We started, going back to our opening, which was on September 11th, that was a strategic opening on our part. Sure. We knew that we were opening in the pandemic. We only did drive-through, and people could actually walk in and grab stuff, but we didn't have any seating at that point. So the opening had its challenges. There were a lot of people, and especially we talk about our generation, and I'm 57, the generation that knows Minuteman. Well, their concept of Minuteman, pandemic notwithstanding, come in, sit down, commune with the community. Your folks in the community, bring your family in, bring your kids, bring your grandkids. So we couldn't do that, and that broke my heart. Yeah, I have to be honest with you. I mean, I just so much passion behind this thing that I wanted it to be exactly like people needed to remember it, but we couldn't do that. Regulations didn't call for that. Oh, so we had just an amazing opening, and people came through, and the lines for the drive-through were all the way down to the entrance to the parking lot, and then we phased in our seating, not full seating in the beginning, but we adjusted the restaurant and then phased that in, and so now we're leveling off. The operation has stabilized, and people are coming into Jacksonville to see us, and they're coming from all over different parts of the state. Sure. And we're very, very happy with the progress we've made, especially during the challenges of this difficult time.
And then I see that your next way you expanded is so smart, because again, everybody listening has to understand what you said earlier, which is not every town in Arkansas had a Minuteman, but lots of them did. And it was the highlight of the culinary scene in those towns, whether that's Arkadelphia or Clarksville or Newport or wherever it is. And then you got food trucks. And so now, first off, what I've learned about food trucks is when it shows up somewhere, it's special because it's not there all the time. And you can go places that are where Minuteman is a very important and revered brand without building a bricks and mortar. So I knew about one truck, and then I saw you got one that's kind of got a space capsule theme, and now look at your food truck schedule, and clearly you have at least two, because at 11 o'clock, one's in Benton and one's in Newport. So that's right. So are you running two food trucks now? So we're running a couple of food trucks, and part of the reason that with our team, and this goes also to my the strategic thinking of my business partner, General Michelle. I brought him in because he actually has a hospitality background, and his family had restaurants many years ago before his military career. But what he has been able to do is actually help us help our team and infuse it with more of a level of strategic thinking. Right. And also he talks about it is strategic theater. To answer your question, yes, there was a Minuteman in every small town. There was one in Newport. I mean, there's Russellville, Searcy, and you can't build restaurants as fast as you want to. No. And you have to look at the market now and say, is there first off, how many Burger Kings are there? How many McDonald's are there? Sure. And we can't sell that same amount. We can't sell or sell at the same cost as those folks can, because they've scaled it. But the other thing that we can do is we can answer a demand signal immediately. Again, I mentioned Newport. We were in Newport 2 days ago. Turnout was phenomenal because everyone remembered the Minuteman, and we set up outside the still standing existing Minuteman, which looks like a Minuteman and is now an empty building. And people came in droves, and they told stories, and they talked about their having worked at Minuteman. So really what we're looking at is, instead of us
people waiting on us to turn around and say, well, go build a restaurant somewhere, which of course logistically is very difficult to do, and you've got to finance all these things. Let us get back out into Arkansas.
Sure.
Let's go. We can go. We can move fast here. As long as the food is good, as long as the care and the attention to detail is there, then we can do this and we can do it faster.
Yeah, and people have gotten used to food trucks and love food trucks. And again, because it's not always there, it's like you better move, you better go today because the Minuteman truck is here and we know it's coming back, but we don't know exactly when. So I think that's a great way to scale your business and to reintroduce the brand to so many people who love it without having to spend a ton of time and money throwing up buildings in every town. So I think that is neat. And, again, as I mentioned early on in this chat here on Heaping Spoonful, you came to know a guy who's got to be super impressive. And I know he's a partner of yours in this business. And I know he doesn't live here, but he comes here. And I want to meet him because I'd love to just, a former newspaper reporter, pick his brain. That's retired Air Force Brigadier General John Michel. And again, you Google him, and first off, you see about his great Air Force career, which was, just he became a brigadier general, ran a whole country's worth of operations for the United States Air Force. And then you read about this place called the Gratitude Cafe. So there we are in Kabul, Afghanistan, on an Air Force base, and he's got this cool coffee cafe there. And you learned about it. And tell us that story. That's one of my favorites of what I've heard.
So a lot of stories today, and thank you. And again, I appreciate you doing your homework on this. When I was in the middle of working on Minuteman and also kind of putting things down on paper and saying, how can I help other entrepreneurs? I started looking around saying, okay, I'd like to do something for veterans. So that was part of what I put on paper. And then the other thing is I'd also like to do, something where I'm going to be able to engage with people and, teach some of the lessons that I've learned. And so long and short, I began to think of this thing called the Avalon Institute. Mm-hmm. And Avalon goes back to the Knights of the Round Table. And, here's Avalon. Let's get a group of people together and let's solve problems and do some thinking. And that was really kind of where I thought the theme of it should go. When I started looking at military, helping people, doing this, pay it forward, I came across this guy who had a very big social media presence, General John Michel, and he was doing something very interesting in Afghanistan. His model over there in Afghanistan was his mission was he was head of NATO command with a multinational force, and they had about a year plus to train the Afghan Air Force, which we had dumped a boatload of money into, throwing equipment at them and supposed expertise, and we're financing all this. And he was the person who was told by his superiors, you've got to go in and fix this because we're bleeding here and nothing is getting done. Well, what John does, General Michel, he goes in and very quickly realizes we have a human problem here. People are not connecting. They're not doing their jobs. They're not motivated. He had to deal with multinational force, Afghan leadership, and then the most important part of the equation. Who was that? That was actually the maintainers of the airplanes and this aircraft. So he gets his team together, in order to solve this problem, he realizes that he needs to train the lowest rung of the Afghan Air Force and do it in a way that what he determined as high human. He says, I've got to get people to come together and exchange ideas and talk and be in a place where we can all start from the same place. And he turns figures out he's got a shipping container, and he creates a coffee shop because coffee culture, tea culture, people like to sit around. They want to talk about things. They're working at the same time. He starts holding all of his meetings in this coffee shop. He sends out social media pings to people over in the States like me. And I looked at this and I go, oh my gosh, what's this guy doing over here? I start sending coffee. I had a bunch of my old vendors, and I said, "Hey guys, I'm send a bunch of coffee over to this guy at Gratitude Cafe in Kabul. Here's the PO. Send it over there." So he starts getting coffee from a bunch of people, and he's building this. Again, what he realized is that the key to keeping these aircraft up in the air were the maintainers, and I think he said that he had 7 or 8 of them when he started. And they built that by over 100%. I mean, actually, I take that back. I think he said they had 30 or 40 at the end of the mission. And they had people working 16-hour days because he was treating them like they were humans. The Afghan leadership didn't treat them that way. They just said, well, these guys are just workers and they don't care. The key to it is he had, from a servant leadership model, he had his officers serving the coffee too.
Yeah.
He put everything on its head. He spun it on its head, and he got people motivated around that different model.
And that coffee shop was neutral ground. And, we're all equals, and we're all swapping ideas, and you got multinational folks in there. He's a NATO commander. Yeah, I mean, again, in retrospect, it seems obvious, but it was brilliant. It was brilliant. So, and again, as I did my research, Minuteman's motto is "Service is our strength," and you have lofty goals as you grow the business, and having veteran leadership in the company be veterans and give them opportunities. But also, we're recording this episode of Heaping Spoonful at the very end of April 2021. And I see where less than a month ago on April 1st, you partnered with Benny Keith and y'all fed 500 people in North Little Rock as part of Minuteman's several things. Buy one, give one, currency of caring, and wooden nickel programs. So tell us about those and why they're important to General Michelle and to you.
Well, when we launched our mobile, we also knew that, again, the issue about going out into communities, the communities that have changed in Arkansas, as we know. I mean, there is we're in the middle of a pandemic and there is poverty. So what we realized with mobile is that as much as we can be successful, we also want to, since we're out in the community, we also want to get to folks who may be experiencing food insecurity. So we partnered with Officer Tommy Norman, who's doing great stuff here in North Little Rock, and connected with him and said, you do such great work in the communities. We'd like to help you out. We'd like to get with you here to talk about what can we do. So we had a couple strategy sessions and everything. And then we realized that it's like, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. For every meal that we serve, because we're launching our mobile, then let's hold a meal, and we'll get over to a community of his choosing, and folks that he knew would respond to it and would enjoy having us come into the community and appreciate it, and said let's get in there. And so we very quickly got to our 500 meal threshold. And we're able to go there, and we spent an entire day on a Saturday and handed out meals, and it was great. It was just a great community gathering, and this is what Minuteman used to do. Minuteman was the center of the community, right. And so for all walks of life, it was a place where you could go and you could feel good about being there, and that goes back to, again, the foundation of what we think Minuteman was, because it always was this. Minuteman supported sports teams. What a lot of people don't know, about building bridges with Minuteman. Minuteman in Arkansas was one of the first multiracial business opportunity franchise in the country, and he'd partnered with there's a guy who's still around today, a gentleman over in North Little Rock to bring Minuteman to North Little Rock when times were challenging in the 70s, and so again, an expansive vision. But also speaking to those in need and drawing them into the fold in a positive way. And this goes back to the whole servant leadership model. That's really what I think the future of Minuteman needs to be. We have a ways to go, believe me.
Oh, I understand. Well, anybody, again, out there listening to Heaping Spoonful today that doesn't know about Officer Tommy Norman, just Google him. Officer Tommy Norman in North Little Rock, and he's done amazing things. He's also raised the profile and the understanding of the police in North Little Rock, and no better person to partner with because he knows exactly where to take you so that you're serving people who need to be served, which I think is fabulous. So I'm so happy about all of this. And, and again, I take for granted that I've got $8 or $10 to go eat, or 10, 12, 15, whatever it takes. A lot of people don't. And so, as you said, with this pandemic has caused more food insecurity. So your program to make sure that part of your proceeds are plowed back into giving meals to other people, and I'm sure that's a program that we'll continue to see grow. So, Perry, I really appreciate you taking time to be my guest today on Heaping Spoonful. Good luck in pushing forward with the Minuteman brand, and thanks what you're doing for all you and your partners are doing to give back. So I want to thank all of you listening to Heaping Spoonful. We post new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of each month. So keep an eye and an ear out for them, and please go back and check out some of the ones you've missed. So thanks everybody for listening. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Heaping Spoonful. On behalf of all of us at Benny Keith Foods, Mid-South Division, please know how much we love connecting you with the legends of the culinary scene and their unique stories. I look forward to the next time we can offer you another Heaping Spoonful.